Alright, Frank. Now that we've got a sense of where the systemic approach fits in the big picture of psychology, let's dive into the heart of it. This paradigm isn't just a set of ideas, it's a revolution in how we think about human connection, and it was sparked by three brilliant minds: Don D. Jackson, Gregory Bateson, and Milton H. Erickson. These guys were like the rock stars of a new way of seeing the world. Let me take you on a quick journey through who these giants were, what they brought to the table, and share a glimpse of the treasures I found in those archives. I think your listeners will love this because this information isn't just for therapists. It's a way to make sense of the world. Don Jackson, the architect of family dynamics. In 1959, he founded the Mental Research Institute in Palo Alto, the world's first institute dedicated to family therapy. This groundbreaking move created a hub for systemic thinking, where new ideas about human connection could flourish. As one of the first psychiatrists in the US to bring families of psychiatric patients into the therapy sessions, Jackson had a unique gift for spotting patterns in their interactions, revealing how family dynamics shape behavior. To glimpse Don Jackson's genius, there's a clip from the MRI archives I absolutely love. It features the brilliant Paul Vaslavic sharing how Jackson's work completely transformed his worldview. Watching Vaslavic recount this experience, it's like seeing a light bulb moment frozen in time, revealing the power of systemic thinking.
What I'm going to present to you may give some of you the impression that I have never heard of how to do therapy. Evidently, I have never heard of Freud, of the right approaches to solve human problems, etc., etc. Yes, I have. I got my training at the Jung Institute in Zurich. So I'm not only trained in going into the personal unconscious and look for the reasons there that makes the person behave like this in the present, but also the collective unconscious, full of archetypes. And so let me please insist on this. For me, the turnaround came, as you already mentioned, after 3 years of teaching at the University of El Salvador, psychopathology, psychodynamics. I went to Philadelphia, Temple University, and there I had the incredible fortune of seeing Don Jackson, who had come just to give a presentation of his theories. And I tell you, this has absolutely turned me totally around. And Jackson was fantastic. I mean, he sometimes did therapy within the first 10 minutes of the first session. I remember a couple of cases, let me mention them. He once worked with a gentleman who was convinced that he knew he was too suspicious. He himself knew this. He was full of suspicions. And Jackson, started working with him. And at a given moment, the man said, "Dr. Jackson, do you know that there are hidden microphones in your office?" And Jackson did not say, "What makes you think that? And what in your past gives you these suspicions?" No, he got up, looked behind the furniture, took the books out of the bookshelves, turned up the carpet, until the patient said, "Dr. Jackson, it isn't that important, And he began to talk about things that indeed were of importance in his life. Another marvelous case that I remember is at the VA hospital. They asked him to give a presentation as to how to establish contact with a very withdrawn patient. And they had brought in a man who was in their closed ward, an elderly man who believed he was God, and never spoke to anybody and never participated in any activities in the ward. So they brought him in. He sat there next to Don Jackson and just looked. And Jackson tried the various approaches to establish communication with somebody like this, and it was totally useless. So he got up out of his chair, walked over, knelt down on his knees in front of the patient, pulled out the ward key, and said, "If you are God, then you have more right to this key than I have. if you aren't God, I think you're being very, very, you should pay much more attention to what's going on around you. And he got up and went back to his chair, and the patient got up, put his chair in front of Jackson's, looked at him and said, "Man, of the two of us, one is crazy." And another person who had an enormous influence on us was Gregory.
Gregory Bateson, the philosopher of patterns, the big picture thinker who brought a philosopher's mind to psychology. Bateson wasn't just a psychologist, he was an anthropologist, a biologist, and a cyberneticist. His father, William Bateson, coined the term genetics. He saw the world as a web of relationships, whether it was a coral reef, a tribal culture in Papua New Guinea, or a family. His genius was in understanding feedback loops, how systems regulate themselves through constant communication. In human terms, that means the way we talk, argue, or even stay silent sends signals that shape the system we're in. Jackson and Bateson's famous concept, the double bind, came from studying families with schizophrenic members. They noticed the contradictory messages, like a parent saying, "I love you," but acting cold, could trap someone in an impossible situation, creating mental chaos. The Bateson project was never formally under the MRI's label, even though Gregory Bateson became a research associate and participated in teaching. Here's another archives gem in which Václavík talks about one of the early out-of-the-box experiments at the MRI.
The strangely blinding effect of certain things, certain little events that blind us to the possibilities, to the alternatives. We have tried to study already this process. Let me mention one early experiment performed at MRI, and it was supposed to explore a little bit how people get into this kind of no-exit situation. You may have heard the example, bear with it please, it bears repeating. It is Dr. Jackson, it involves Dr. Jackson, who, as you probably know, was an internationally known expert on the psychotherapy of schizophrenia. And we asked him one day if he was willing to have himself filmed in a first interview with a paranoid patient whose main delusion was to be a clinical psychologist. And Dr. Jackson agreed to this, and we then went to the VA in Menlo Park, and where we knew a clinical psychologist who also did the therapy of schizophrenics. And we asked him if he was willing to have himself filmed in a first interview with a paranoid patient whose main delusion it was that he was a psychiatrist. And then we brought the two learned doctors together in a kind of a super therapy session, in which both promptly began to treat each other. And the more mental health and reason and therapeutic endeavors they injected into the situation, the crazier they appeared to the other, of course. And I must say, this experiment has always been on my mind and has influenced a great deal of what I am doing.